Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds. I'm Adam Caplan. This is a special show here. I wanted to kind of give you some intel if you're a Steeler fan or a Dolphin fan or an NFL fan who wants to get caught up and get an idea of what and people are thinking around the league on the big Steelers Dolphins trades. Sometimes trades are overrated. When people call it blockbusters, they're generally not. But this one's a blockbuster in a variety of ways, probably in more than you think, and we'll get into that. And I'll give you not only reaction about but fit and money, and then we also have the other trade on Tuesday, which came out. The Darren Waller coming out of retirement. I have some really interesting intel from the Giants when he was there. Unfortunately, his career ended prematurely uh, because of a hamstring problem, which we'll discuss. But there's some interesting background on him. We'll talk about the Dolphin situation going forward. I know Dolphin fans are like trying to figure out what the hell are they doing, where are they going here. Steeler fans, what they're trying to do, it's somewhat obvious, but not as obvious as you think. And we'll explain schematically what this thing's going to look like for both teams. And away we go. So let's get to it. So Steelers, right? Steelers, they get Jonnu Smith, they get Jalen Ramsey in a seventh round pick, and you ask, okay, well, why are they doing this, right? We're going to get started with them, then we'll get to Miami and everything that they're doing. But this, from talking to some people connected to the Steelers over the last, I'm going to say 3 to 4 months, whether I was at the Senior Bowl, Combine, getting information from kind of what people in the league thought they were going to do in the draft, there was this thought that, and it really it really would start with the DK Metcalf trade, getting him from Seattle. They're going to pay him $35 million in total cash this season, which is not the Steeler way at wide receiver, but they did it. And that's the point here. Omar Khan, I got to give him credit, their general manager. This is one of the classier franchises who's very old school and builds to the draft, and they don't want to build their roster through free agency or in trades getting players from other teams. They want to build with their own players. But, and Andy Weidel knows this, who's the Steelers assistant GM, and others that were with the Eagles. I know that there's Max Gruder, who's assistant pro director, and some other people who work for the Steelers know this, who work for Howie Roseman. You could build your team in a variety of ways. You don't have to build it strictly for the draft. Why is Howie Roseman arguably the NFL's best GM? Well, he builds through draft and through free agency. And Howie, really since 21, has become one of the better drafters in the NFL. He's just not making the big mistakes that he used to. So Howie's done a great job. He's called the king of free agency, but it's not just that. He does a good job of balancing both, where the Steelers for years, they just ignored free agency or would be very selective. Omar Khan, through caution to the wind, you can't be scared to be great. Omar went after it, getting Metcalf. They knew all along that Pickens was not going to be with the team. They, as I was told, I'm going to say a year ago, there was no way that Pickens was going to come back without an extension. They didn't think he could handle it. It would be a distraction, a problem. And they moved him to the Cowboys to replace him with DK Metcalf. So Metcalf will replace him, who's very, very gifted. And they're paying Metcalf a lot of money, $35 million. He's going to make this season. And they made that trade, and they got that done, as you know, back in March. So you kind of know that they're set at receiver with Metcalf. Arthur Smith is heavy 12 personnel. He doesn't play a lot of 3 receivers. 12 personnel is 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and of course 1 running back. But to pay Metcalf about $33 million a year is what the average value is over the 4 seasons. He's got to get the football. It's going to go through him. But the other question is, you got to have a passing game. You can't just go to one guy every target. So where's it going to go? And this is where Steeler fans don't understand. Well, it's going to go through Pat Freiermuth next. He's making $12.5 million. Why do they need to trade for Jonnu Smith and then increase his pay from just over $4 million, which he was going to make from the Dolphins, to now pay him around $12 million? Well, the way it was explained to me is not only does Arthur Smith, obviously he coached them twice. If you followed Jonnu Smith's career, he coached them in Tennessee and Atlanta. He called the plays for Jonnu for a lot of his years with the Titans. But it's really the way that they see this offense, not only this season, potentially. Look, if Jonnu Smith blows it up, and they're going to be, they believe it starts with a run. It has always started with a one with them, unless they felt that their defense wasn't good enough, or they were so deep at receiver they felt they needed to play 11 personnel with Ben Roethlisberger. That's not the way they do it anymore. They're heavy 12. So going forward, you get Jonnu Smith in there. If he blows it up, and look, by the way, he was terrific for Miami. It's quite the story. Who saw this, right? The way that he signed that huge deal, 4 years, $50 million with the Patriots. Jonnu Smith did in March of 2021. They got rid of him after 2 years of Patriots because he just didn't play well. He revived his career under Arthur Smith at 23, improved on that last season. And the Steelers felt that because they're going to be heavy 12 personnel, let's get a second tight end who could do everything. And what does that mean? So Jonnu Smith could play the Y position, which is in line. He could play the move position, which is the F position. And you also could do, Freiermuth could do both. Smith is a better mover. So you have that versatility. Either guy could be the Y or the F. And now you're cooking here because with their with their tight end situation, with Darnell Washington and Donald Parham's injury, Darnell Washington is not quite developed as rapidly as they would want. Now, I know there's a question about his weight sometimes, but the guy's got talent. He just is not taken to the next level as their number 2 tight end. So they'll work it between Freiermuth now and Jonnu Smith, and Washington will be the third. And Connor Hayward's still there, as we know. But the bottom line is, it makes more sense than Steeler fans think to bring it in. It's 12 personnel. Jonnu Smith, by the way, could carry the football. He's done a little bit in his career. He's terrific running after the catch. He's had a number of big plays. I like this move. I know that people are saying, why are you tying up all this money over $23 million on 2 tight ends? That's a lot of money. I get that. It's a lot of cash. It's a decent amount of cap. The cash is what clubs care about. It's a lot of money to tie up. But Arthur Smith has got to justify this in terms of his play calling. He's got to get Jonnu Smith the ball. The good thing is he knows him. He obviously knows Freiermuth. He's coached them for 2 years. So I get it from that standpoint. Now, let's talk about Jalen Ramsey, which I know there are bigger questions about. Why would you trade for Jalen Ramsey when you're paying Darius Slay $10 million, right? You got Joey Porter Jr., who you love. So how are you going to make this work, right? From a schematic standpoint. Well, and then I know there's some people with the Steelers think that Brandon Eccles will be their nickel, is going to make $3 million. That makes a lot of sense. By the way, I'm told his tape was pretty good with the Jets. There were a number of teams in it for him. I know the Eagles liked him for free agency. So Eccles is a good player, formerly of the Jets. So they really felt that, and I think fans kind of lost this part of it. Jalen Ramsey, folks, he's not under contract just for one season. You have to look at that, because I get that. When there were rumors about this, about a week ago, I'm like, what sense would this make? Why would they make a trade for a guy who does turn 31 this fall? And it just, you've got Darius Slay. What does it make for this season? But as I've learned this for 27 years, you got to think past the season with guys have long-term contracts. Ramsey signed a 3-year extension worth $24.1 million last season. Last September, right before the season started. I know Dolphin fans were like, why would you do this? And I get it. Chris Greer made a mistake, and he wound up trading him to the Steelers. But for Steeler fans, Ramsey signed through 2028, so you've got him under team control. By the way, this is a really important point. There's no fully guaranteed money past this season. They're obviously locked into this season. So if it doesn't work, it's not like they gave up a lot of future compensation to get him. They're paying him a lot of cash this season, just under $20 million. But there's no commitment and fully guaranteed money past this season. So they could just cut him or trade him if he doesn't play well. Obviously, you don't want to cut him. I'm sure there'd be value in him even if he didn't play well. But you have to think outside the box with this trade, because it doesn't make sense on paper. But again, Slay's up after the season. He's the oldest starting corner, 34 years old. By the way, he had knee surgery in December of 2023. There was a concern with one of his knees, I'm told, over the years. So you have to look at that. And you also have to look at this. If teams are going to run a lot of 11 personnel against them, I get it. Eccles could be the nickel defender, the slot corner. But also, if you play teams that have an athletic tight end, Ramsey's a tall corner at over 6 feet. There are certain things formationally. You could play big nickel. There's a way formationally you could have him play safety. I know he's not a safety. I get that. The things you could do with him. But again, also to finish this off, think past the season. It's not just about this year. We get too narrowly focused sometimes on trades. I'm not defending anything from either team. I've got my criticisms of more on the Dolphins and the Steelers. I kind of like this more for the Steelers. I like the out of the box thinking. But Arthur Smith here, he's just got to do a better job of play calling. He's got to look. He's got to get Metcalf the ball. He's got to scheme him open. This is the one knock on Arthur Smith from a visual standpoint, from conceptual standpoint, from talking to NFL sources on him. Not the most imaginative play caller. Well, now you got Jonathan Smith who can move. Freiermuth is a good pass catcher. And we know that the tight ends are going to play a lot. They might lead the league in 12 personnel this season. Would not surprise me if they did that. Now, what Roman Wilson probably will be their number 2 receiver. By the way, whether it's Calvin Austin or Robert Woods, who's near the end of his career, or Ben Skoranek. Well, my man Rock Taylor, by the way, he always liked out of Memphis, who was not drafted. He should have been drafted. We'll see if he makes the team. But whoever the number 2 receiver is not going to get the football anyway, because it's going to go through the second pass target's going to go through the tight end. So don't worry about who the number 2 receiver is. The pass target tree is obvious. It's Jonnu Smith or Freiermuth as the 2, Metcalf as the 1, and the fourth guy is not going to get the football. Now on third down, you're going to see a lot of Kenny Gainwell, who's their best pass protection back. This is a bargain signing. It was as I understand, between him and the Eagles, between the Steelers and the Eagles to get him back. But he signed with the Steelers. They got Caleb Johnson, who will eventually be their starter. Of course, Jalen Warren was on an RFA tender. So, I mean, there you really have it, folks. From the Steelers' end of it, I get why they did it. You got to let it play out before overreacting. But the bottom line is, it's about Ramsey. He's the centerpiece of this trade. The underrated part of it is Jonnu Smith, who turns 30 later this year, looked great with the Dolphins. The Dolphins just didn't want to increase his pay. He was going to make just over $4 million, and the Dolphins did. So, the Steelers did. So we'll see how this works out. Now, also understand the Steelers play a lot of man coverage. They were top 10 in man coverage last season, about 33%. He's played plenty of zone. He's played plenty of man. He's played inside before. By the way, I don't know how much he loves it. Vic Fangio did that with him 2 years ago. I think he could play some safety in certain personnel packages. Right now, the Steelers think it's going to be Juan Thornhill to replace Fitzpatrick. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But Juan Thornhill is going to make $3 million this season. Looks like he'll replace, at least right now, Fitzpatrick. Now, why trade Minkah Fitzpatrick, who had a high cap number, but more importantly, $15.5 million in non-guaranteed base salary, lack of ball production, and not just interceptions, low passes defense the last 2 seasons, didn't make plays on the ball. And the other thing is, this is what I know defensive coaches have told me over the years, don't get so locked in on interceptions. It's also, ball production is also, did you make the play when the ball was around you? Not the interception so much. Did you deflect the ball? Did you also make them go to somebody else because you were right on the tight end or the receiver? And he just didn't make plays, and he was not the player the last 2 seasons that he was early after the trade getting from Miami. So you see, you kind of get, it's called cash justification. They couldn't justify paying him $15.5 million. I totally get that. And there was a feeling around the league that they were open to trading him, and you saw what happened. Now, as far as TJ Watt, I just want to clear something up because I was quoted. I do some videos for Sports Grid every week with Scott Farrell, and I think what happened, some bloggers conflated what I said, and they didn't understand. They completely didn't understand what I meant. So I'll explain it once again for people to understand. The Steelers would like to take care of TJ Watt. Okay, that's very clear to me from what I've understood for months. But you just can't roll over. He turns 31 this fall. He probably will be a Hall of Famer someday. I mean, what a great draft pick. Great guy. Been a great story development, right? But you look at his situation. He's on the last year of his 4-year extension. He's making over $28 million. We know where the money's gone. You're looking at Micah Parsons at minimum of $40 million, if not more, right, per season. Now, Micah Parsons is much younger than TJ Watt. Is there a middle ground? Well, if I'm the Steelers and if I'm TJ Watt and his representation, I just want to see what that deal looks like first before getting it done. Now, this other part, now let me explain Nick Herbig. I didn't say like, well, the reason why they're not going to sign TJ Watt, or if they don't, is because of Nick Herbig. That's not what I said on Sports Grid. What I said was it does impact his career. Because if you sign TJ Watt to an extension, which will really essentially he'll end his career as a Steeler, right? You would think it would be a 3 or 4 year deal. So that would take him to 34, 35. That's obviously going to end his career with them, that extension. Well, Nick Herbig's on a third year of his 4 year deal. So that ends it for him coming back. So that's all I meant. I didn't say like, well, the reason why they won't bring TJ Watt back if they don't is because of Nick Herbig. That's not the reason. It would play into it, but that's not the reason. It's just because they couldn't agree on a deal and what the numbers would look like. But everything I've been told has been they want to get it. They want to get a deal done for him for TJ Watt to and his career with the Steelers, but they're not there yet. It's not a lock. It's just not. Now you should know that the last time they did TJ Watt's deal, when did it get done? Hugging up to the start of the season, September 10th, 2021. So Steeler fans, don't go crazy here. Now, if they traded him, and I learned this the hard way when teams say they don't want to trade him, they don't want to trade a player. I go back to 2018 with Khalil Mack, talking to the Raiders. They told me flat out they're not trading him. And what happened is John Gruden, who kind of commandeered personnel control, he told Rachel McKenzie, let's move him. Let's move Khalil Mack for as much as we can get. And they thought, I mean, they got good compensation from the Bears, but they also thought the Bears wouldn't make the playoffs in 2018, and unfortunately they did. And their draft compensation, the draft picks were not as high as they originally thought they would be because the Bears were better than they thought. But the bottom line is, let's be careful of assuming anything with the TJ Watt situation. Let's see how it plays out. But they do like Nick Herbig. That's all my point was. Let's go to the Dolphins. Okay, so they get Minkah Fitzpatrick back, right? Well, why would they do this? Well, the Steelers, because they put out so much cash, in a way, they have to kind of move cash. And to move this, and again, the convenient excuse is Minkah Fitzpatrick was not as good as a football player the last 2 seasons, which is a fact. Okay, so they move his cash. They have Deshaun Elliott, by the way, who's been a great story, who the Steelers extended his contract. So that's the Steelers part of it. So the Dolphins get Minkah Fitzpatrick back, and they get a 2027 fifth round pick back, right? A 2027 fifth round pick back, and they gave back the Steelers the seventh. So I mentioned already the situation with Jonnu Smith. You know, they moved him. The Steelers get him. But getting back to Minkah Fitzpatrick. So they get Minkah Fitzpatrick back. They got Ife Malfuano back over from Detroit, who's really talented, by the way. A lot of injuries, tall safety. They've got the Dolphins now have really good size and athleticism at safety. Both can be moved around. I like it from that standpoint. But trading Jalen Ramsey, who the Dolphins were going to move, no matter, folks, there was zero chance that Ramsey was going to be on the team. They were done with him. He was done with them. This is going to happen. Anyone who covers the league from a national standpoint knows what's happening behind the scenes. But they're good there. Action Davis comes over from the Jets, who's an athletic mover as well. So they're good there. Cornerback's a disaster. Kader Kohu, yes, can play nickel. He's been a good story development as a undrafted free agent in 22. But Storm Duck is another undrafted free agent, was a good story. These are not A-level corners. They really want Cam Smith to start. He was a second rounder in 2023. They're not going to hand him the job. He isn't developed yet. Artie Burns, who's a journeyman, former Steeler, they're gonna figure this out in training camp. It would not surprise me at all if they added another veteran. Here are the veterans. I'll give you my list of best available free agents. For Anthony Weaver, their defensive coordinator, they kind of have to. It's before the season. They don't have to by training camp. It would behoove them. It's not a great group. Now, yes, they cut Kendall Fuller. By the way, this is how much their defense has changed. 7 starters are gone from the opening game against the visiting Jaguars last season. Only 4 starters remain. That's a lot of change. But getting back to the corners that are out there, Asante Samuel Jr., who's coming off a neck injury, he's by far the best corner. The ageless Stephon Gilmore, who's older than Darius Slade, by the way. Kendall Fuller, who they cut. Rasul Douglas is his own corner. Manuel Mosley, too many ACL injuries. Fabian Moreau is an older corner who's pretty athletic and tall. C.J. Henderson, a former first rounder for the Jaguars. Cam Sutton, who's out there. And there's not much out there, but they need to add a veteran at some point before the season or they could trade for one. But look, they're in a tough way. They're in a tough way at corner. I mean, if I'm any team that's going against their defense, I'm going heavy 11 personnel and I'm going after that secondary. I'm going to spread them out. That to me is the way that you would beat them. We again, they got Micah Fitzpatrick back. Now, let's talk about this situation with Darren Waller, which is fascinating. So Darren Waller, folks, and the Dolphins were heavily looking for a tight end, and I'll give you my list of free agents. Also, it doesn't stop them. Darren Waller hasn't played football since 2023, and the end of the season on IR. Darren Waller is an athletic mover tight end. He's a F tight end. He's not an inline tight end. He can do it, but that's not his deal. He had chronic hamstring issues. But let me tell you something, folks. For Dolphin fans, I'll say this. If he's behind, and I know he's looked into the hamstring problems, if he's got 80% left in his legs to run, he was dominant. And I was there, and I talked to the Giants about it. No one could cover him 2 years ago in training camp. And he looked fine to start the season, but the hamstring problems caught him early in the season. Started off well, but then they caught up to him. If the hamstring problems are behind him, I know that's a big if. If he can still run pretty well, folks, you can't cover this guy. He's too big. Remember, he's a former receiver. No one could cover him in training camp. I remember talking to one of the coaches who was telling me every day he's beating us. Every day. Nobody could cover him. So you got to help him, though. Now, the Dolphins, this is kind of crazy. All they really have left is Farrah Brown as a journeyman wide tight end, inline blocker, and a bunch of undrafted free agent tight ends. Julian Hill, 23, undrafted free agent. Tanner Connor, undrafted free agent, 22. Jalen Connor's undrafted free agent this year, and Rucci, who was an undrafted free agent last year. So they get Waller. He's got to get through training camp. You got to see what happens. Now, the best available free agents on the street or Gerald Everett, who was cut by the Bears, is an athletic move tight end. Jordan Akins, who could do both. By the way, he was a former Major League Baseball player. He actually was drafted I think like the third round as a third rounder, but he's also a tight end. Obviously, he turns 33. Jeff Swaim, who's really old, he's been around a long time. He's a wide tight end in line. So there's not a lot of choice. They're probably going to have to add another tight end at some point, but they don't have to do it now. So, folks, they're a team that's in transition. The team is built with edge rushers if they could stay healthy. Bradley Chubb, we know about the injuries. Jalen Phillips, we know about the injuries. Chop Robinson looked really good as a rookie. But they've got a lot of questions to answer. I've called this team the team in neutral. They're right in the middle. They don't know who they are. We know that they're going to be a heavy 12 personnel team on offense with two tight ends, and they got to figure out who's going to help Waller out. Is it going to be Farrah Brown as the Y? Probably. If again, that's if Waller could last. We know it starts with Achane. They got Madison, who, by the way, could play on third down and goal line. He's a good pass protector, really smart back. Jalen Wright, they hope could develop. And Tua's got to stay upright. And, this reshuffled offensive line. James Daniels comes off his injury. Austin Jackson, is back, obviously. Aaron Brewer's an undersized center. Patrick Paul, first-year start at left tackle. Not a great offensive line. It's a team that's in transition. They got to figure out who they are. I mean, it's a tough deal for Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel. I don't see this being a playoff team, quite frankly. To me, they're a 6 or 7 win team. I know some sports books are picking the Patriots to finish with more wins on the future numbers, to have more wins than the Dolphins. The Jets obviously are going to finish in last, and the Bills are the class. That's a lot. The Bills are locked to win that division. So I feel bad for Dolphin fans. They just don't quite know who they are. But I at least get this. Their plan is to look at some younger players. And the Steelers, they're going for it to finish off. They got Aaron Rodgers, obviously. We know what they're doing. That's obvious. Anyone who follows the Steelers knows this. But I like the aggressiveness by their general manager there. and Omar Khan. You gotta admire his willingness to be aggressive. We'll see how it works out. In that AFC North, where it's the Ravens, then the Steelers and Bengals will duel, or yeah, they'll duke it out for the second place, and the Browns, who the odds makers have 3.5 wins because of the shaky quarterback problem. But that is that. More on Inside the Birds. Check us out at Inside Birds on X, of course. And check out, by the way, this week, our series continue with Greg Cosell, the Intel with Greg Cosell. We took a look at the Washington Commanders and then the Eagles later this week. And that's it from here. I'm Adam Caplan.